This is Rally Round the Cannon, some thoughts on Princeton's history by somebody who should know better. On November 14th at the Yale game, the university celebrated its most recent undefeated football team. It's nice that most of the players are still around, if only to pointedly show the denizens of the current program that it's our rational goal. But that is not the topic here. Instead, there's a more substantial lesson to be gleaned from that remarkable team of 1964. It's a tale of opportunistic triumph over confusion, of focus and simplicity as creative forces, in a phrase, the triumph of the single wing. And ironically, it was accomplished by starving the offense. For you see, the college football world in 1964 was a complete shambles. In the early 1950s, the NCAA had gone on a cost-saving kick and instituted one-platoon football, essentially eliminating specialists and emphasizing all-around athletes who could survive for 60 minutes. This held sway for 12 years, then was reversed after the 1963 season. Coaches and players, now comfy with 11-man football, suddenly had more than 50% of their slots open. Given the honored tradition of intellectual flexibility in football, panic ensued. Princeton, coming off a strong 7-2 Ivy Co-Championship 1963 season, had an unfair advantage. Their coach, Dick Coleman, not only read books, he was something of a historian. He recalled enough, for example, to stay firmly with a single-wing offense, a gutty creature of unbalanced line play and direct snaps to the tailback, perfected in Palmer Stadium by his predecessor and mentor Charlie Caldwell of the class of '25 during the 1940s and 50s. As college teams had gone rapidly to the sexy T formation, opponents found the Princeton single-wing increasingly hard to defend since they got no exposure to it otherwise. Coleman also recalled the 1951 Princeton season, symbolized by one of the great photos ever run here in your favorite periodical, showing Dick Kazmaier of the class of '52 and 10 empty helmets in a single-wing formation. Princeton, following an undefeated Lambert Trophy year in 1950 and amid Heisman buzz surrounding All-American tailback Kazmaier, had no other starters back on offense. Caldwell, who actually wrote books, had responded counterintuitively. He gathered up his 11 best athletes apart from Kazmaier and put them on defense, reasoning that it would give the offense time to round into shape. The goal was to win games, not Heismans. Sure enough, the Tigers' production dropped from 39 points a game, but only to 34. But they shut out their three toughest opponents, Brown, Yale, and Dartmouth, and went undefeated again. Poor Kazmaier took one for the team. His per carry average dropped from an insane 6 yards to an astounding 5.8, but he did manage to salvage the Heisman. Good man. So, Coleman, when two platoons came around again in 1964, took his experienced fast guys and put them on defense. The exception, well, sort of the exception, he actually was the only Tiger who consistently still played both ways, was Cosmo Iacovazzi of the class of '65, the intimidating first-team All-American fullback who had tied Hobie Baker's Princeton season touchdown record the year before. He punished people in both directions and was encouraged to continue. The league picture was a muddle. Every team other than Penn was given some sort of a chance, and even the '63 co-champs had finished 5-2, hardly awesome. So when the Tigers started off with 3 and 10-point home wins over mediocre Rutgers and Columbia, the lack of experienced offense became alarming. Especially since the next game was the Tigers' first ever trip to Hanover, New Hampshire. Somehow, the strange journey to the wild land of Black Bears and nemesis coach Bob Blackman created the offensive focus that had been lacking. It was 10-0 at the half and 20-0 at the end of the third quarter, and Princeton got its revenge for the prior year's loss 37-7. This was followed by offensively lackluster home wins over Colgate 9-0 and Harvard 16-0. A 14-0 bruiser at Brown with Yakavazi getting 178 yards rushing, and a 55-0 plastering of awful Penn at Franklin Field, in which Princeton had 360 yards rushing and Penn crossed midfield for the first time with 2 minutes left. Coleman noted that the defense, with Stas Malashevsky of the class of '66 doing a passable version of Illinois' fearsome linebacker Dick Butkus, was superb. With 7 points total allowed in 5 games, you think? Coleman said the offense was, quote, making strides. This was all prelude to a ballyhooed showdown for the Ivy Championship in New Haven, with 6-0-1 Yale and 7-0 Princeton duking it out in front of 60,000 fans. The first time since 1906 that the two had met with both unbeaten. Yale scored on its opening drive, becoming the only team to hold a lead on the Tigers the entire season for less than 13 minutes. It was 14-14 at the half, with Yale's Chuck Mercine moving the ball like no one had done on Princeton all year. Then finally, after 8 games of inconsistency, the Tiger offensive line in the second half solved the nuances of single-wing blocking and simply wouldn't surrender the ball. Yakavazi had 185 yards on only 20 carries in the highlight game of his career. The team ended up with 354 yards on the ground, and Princeton never punted after the first quarter. Final, 35-14 Tigers. All that remained for the new Ivy champs was a 3-4-1 Cornell team that was offensively dangerous, having scored 118 points in its last 3 games. But the big problem again was Princeton's offense, because the game was in Palmer Stadium, where they mysteriously were averaging 14.5 points a game as opposed to 35 on the road. Sure enough, the Tigers went up 14-0 at the half, then went into early hibernation. The 17-12 final was closer than it needed to be. Indeed, the most important stat was on the defensive side. Malashevsky had 19 tackles, every one of which was needed. Coleman's defend and conquer strategy in the beginning made itself known to the end. Indeed, the undefeated 1964 Tigers had regressed from 28 points a game, although only to 24 thanks to their mystifying productivity on the road. But they were undefeated since the defense had given up a grand total of 53 points in 9 games. Meanwhile, the afterthought single wing did just what it did best, controlling the ball. Yakavazi ran for 909 yards, 5.3 per carry. Tailbacks Don McKay of 65 and Ron Landek, 66, ran for 632 yards, and the team threw only 8 passes per game. The offense scored more against Penn than the defense allowed in the entire season. They gave away a minuscule 12 turnovers the entire year, while the veteran defense collected 30, a differential of fully 2 per game. Yakavazi repeated as first-team All-American. Fittingly, Malashevsky joined him and Butkus. If you're a football fan, an admittedly dangerous fixation for a Princetonian these days, you have been lately amused, if not transfixed, by the breathless hoopla surrounding the current NFL surprise of the decade. It's the Wildcat. The novel offense, of course, is in reality Charlie Caldwell's single wing, being executed by kids who think it's new and cool and don't know how to do it very well. Better they should remember Charlie like Dick Coleman did and stick to defense. Yours in virtual orange and black, this is Greg Lang of the great class of 70. Man, I hate Bulldogs. Rally Round the Cannon is a podcast from the Princeton Alumni Weekly online.